The ballroom swallowed sound the way deep snow swallows footsteps, muting everything into a hush of crystal and chrome. Chandeliers hung like galaxies above 1,000 small conversations. A string quartet sketched old melodies, while servers slid between gowns and tuxedos with the silent precision of moonlight. From the coatroom's threshold, Nia watched the world of the gala move, as if it were a single animal breathing. She had worked enough nights at the Meridian to read a room the way a nurse reads a pulse, the shape of a smile, the weight of a glance, the way a compliment curdled into cruelty when it landed. She clipped claim tags to wool and cashmere and sequins without looking. Her hands remembered what her mind didn't need to hold. Somewhere inside the ballroom a microphone tested and hummed, a promise that a speech and a check would soon follow. Her phone buzzed against her hip. Not a text, an alert she'd learned to respect. Unknown AirTag moving with you. The words bloomed pale on her screen, small and urgent. Nia's thumb hesitated. She kept her personal settings tight. No constant Bluetooth, location services on a short leash, and she kept an ear tuned for the faint, metallic chirp Apple's trackers made when they wanted to be found. Most people didn't hear them. Nia did. She always had an ear for the details other people ignored. She lifted her head. Coatroom, corridor, ballroom mouth, all the edges and seams where people brushed past one another with an apology that wasn't meant. There, a duffel. The kind of leather that made the word leather seem insufficient, rested against a marble column outside the ballroom doors. A man stood beside it, speaking quietly to a woman whose diamond bracelet caught light like a lighthouse. He was taller than the cameras made him seem on CNBC, face gentler, tailored without effort. Adrian Vale, the one whose foundation's name was printed everywhere tonight. His fiancée, Serena Carlyle, was as precise as a signature. Silk column dress, hair arranged like the first half of a wave, smile calibrated to open a door without ever entering the room. The alert flashed again. AirTag detected near you. The only thing near Nia that could be worth tracking at a charity gala was the man whose net worth got discussed in the financial pages with the abstraction of a weather report. She stepped from the coatroom, not hurrying, not hesitating, and crossed the small space between the worlds. "Mr. Vale?" she said softly. The bodyguard who had been scenery detached from a shadow and reattached himself at Adrian's shoulder with a quick look at Nia's tray-labeled name tag. Adrian's attention shifted without judgment, a small tilt of the head that made space for an answer before it arrived. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Nia said, and kept her voice low. "There's a tracker in your bag." The moment did not shatter. It tightened. Serena's hand paused mid-gesture and fell lightly against her clutch. Adrian glanced at the duffel. A tracker? Nia turned her phone so he could see the alert. "Unknown AirTag moving with me, here, now. I keep my settings clean. I heard a chirp. It's not mine." She let the last two words hang. The bodyguard had already crouched, fingers slipping under the duffel's seams like a piano tuner feeling for misaligned wire. There was the faintest of sounds again. A bird inside a wall. Adrian didn't ask who she was to know such a thing. He didn't ask how she knew. "May I?" he said to the bodyguard, who nodded, and he swept the bag's side with his phone. The signal bloomed, circle on a map, pulses of concentric certainty. The bodyguard found the disc set under the lining with industrial tape, a cheap white coin in a sea of expensive black. Serena's smile recalibrated. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said lightly, like a ribbon twirling shut around a box. "Everyone has trackers in things now. We use them for the dogs, for my suitcases, It's probably mine. I always forget where I put them. Nia tamped down the urge to say, "You don't forget where you put something you hid under a seam." She had already given him the only thing that mattered, the quiet truth offered in time to matter. Adrian's eyes met Nia's. They were the color of slate right before rain. "Thank you." She nodded and slid back into the seam of the corridor where she belonged, and yet perhaps not. As she returned to jackets and tags and small talk, she felt something subtle shift in the air, like a page turning somewhere she could not see. Later, when she had a sliver of quiet, and the second dessert course had gone out in a procession of sugar and steam, Nia leaned against the coat room's interior wall and let breath soften the edges of the night. She texted her mother, "Done at midnight." All good. Her mother texted back a heart. That was their shorthand for the 100 things life was that did not fit into text. Nia had not always noticed the world the way she did now. It was something that had been taught into her the same way you teach a child to cross a street. Look left, look right, look again. Her mother had worked nights on a medical floor where the monitors beeped, and the people didn't always wake from anesthesia with kindness. "Pay attention to the edges," she'd told Nia, stirring stew at a kitchen table that wobbled on one short leg. "Center is where people perform. Edges is where they show you who they are." The Meridian had taught that lesson in different handwriting. Edges held the place where a server's tray tipped, and someone decided whether to apologize or scold. Edges contained the laugh that came half a second too late, the way a wealthy man handed his coat to a young black woman without seeing her face. Edges wore sequins and wore down the soles of cheap flats. She was reading Edges when she saw Serena again. Serena stood with two women near the balcony doors, their heads inclined like the petals of a lily toward the center of the flower. Her laughter, a soft mechanism, didn't reach her eyes. She touched the other women's wrists as she spoke, a small, proprietary press. Adrian was across the room, hand on an elder donor's shoulder, posture that meant, "Now is your story, not mine." The bodyguard, David, she'd learned by how Serena said his name without glancing, stood where he could see both of them at once, mouth align. Nia watched Serena watch Adrian. The glance wasn't the lazy check-in of affection. It was the way a swimmer tracks a buoy. As if his location were the thing that kept her in her lane. As if his location were something she owned. The quartet paused. Glassware chimed. A stage manager in black moved like a shadow behind the drape. It would be time soon for the suffering someone else does to be translated into numbers and applause and photographs of oversized checks. Nia moved a rack of coats a fraction of an inch to the left. She liked objects aligned the way she liked sentences aligned. It helped some days feel survivable. Her phone stayed quiet. The alert had done its work and gone still. The little white coin had gone into a small evidence bag when Adrian, face polite, voice even, asked David to please secure it and run the serial with the kind of professional administration that transforms an instruction into a fact. It is easy to tell yourself that you will forget a moment. It is harder to unhear your own voice saying the thing that turned that moment. Nia heard her own whisper replay in her head and flushed despite herself. It wasn't the audacity that embarrassed her. It was the intimacy. When you step into someone else's radius and tell them the truth, you forge a small bridge whether you mean to cross it or not. The speeches began, and Adrian's did the thing good speeches do. It made a complex pain sound like a problem with an answer. A video of clean water and bright classrooms filled screens. Nia listened with the professional half of her mind and let the other half remember her own scholarships and the adjunct professor who slid books across a desk with a quiet, "I think you'll need this someday." Adrian didn't say anything. He couldn't put on a tax form. He didn't look at Serena when he said the word "we." The edges hummed. The alarm returned like a small migrating bird that knows exactly which tree it has come to. Unknown AirTag moving with you. Nia felt it against her hip before she heard the faint chirp again, somewhere left of where it had been the first time. She set down the stack of black pashminas all hotels pretended were thoughtful, and checked her settings. Silent mode doesn't silence what your bones already learned to notice. The chirp was not inside the ballroom now. It was somewhere just beyond the service corridor that led to the catering office and the staff lockers. She could have called the security desk, but the Meridian's head of security would spend 10 minutes answering the question, "Are you authorized to be in that hallway?" before he called someone else to ask, "Are you authorized to answer her?" You learned which systems protected the guest list and which systems protected the people who hung that list on the easel. The corridor smelled like cut limes and steam. A pair of banquet captains consulted a printout beneath an exit sign's green wash. The chirp came, not louder, not brighter, just the same exact insistence. Nia let herself be pulled by it, the way a person lets their name pull them when it is spoken in a crowd. Her apron pocket buzzed. She froze, because she knew what she had done and not done, and she knew where her hands had been since she last tied her apron strings, and she knew that someone else's decision had just become her problem. She reached into the pocket. Her fingers found plastic. An AirTag, warm from her body heat, sat winking up at her like a smiley face that had been taught to keep secrets. She didn't swear. She didn't throw it. She forced herself to breathe and examine the pocket's seams. The tag had not worked itself down into a corner. It had been placed there. Someone had slipped it in the way you slip a note. Fingers quick. Attention elsewhere. Someone who knew how to move at the edges, too. A noise behind her. The smallest scrape of a heel, then a cough that wanted to be a laugh. Serena's assistant, Giselle, stood a few feet down the corridor pretending not to have been on her way anywhere at all. Her expression was already arranged in the apology that belongs to someone who intends to be the injured party. Her phone lay face down atop her clutch. "Everything okay?" she inquired, voice sugared and soft. Nia weighed the options in a single breath. Call security and watch it become a story about a staffer making a scene. Hide the tag and watch someone else decide what she had done. Or step across the gap she had already stepped across once. She didn't answer Giselle. She walked into the light near the ballroom entrance and looked for slate-colored eyes. Adrian was off stage now, a hand on the back of a chair, while a donor the age of his grandfather knitted gratitude into a story. Nia positioned herself just outside his sight line, hoping the bodyguard would notice what she wanted. And he did. David moved first, the way a storm cloud moves in a time lapse. Suddenly there, and then there was shade. "Something wrong?" he asked, in a tone that said, "You get exactly enough rope to explain yourself, but not 1 inch more." "There's another tag," she said, and showed him. "Someone put it in my apron." David's jaw set. "Here?" She nodded toward the corridor where Giselle's perfume still hung. "There." He held out a hand for the tag but didn't take it when she offered. He didn't want to break whatever chain of possession a lawyer might later pronounce sacred. "Keep it in your hand," he said. "Come with me." Adrian saw them before they reached him, saw David's face and the way Nia's hand was wrapped around something, and he inclined his head toward a side door without finishing the donor's anecdote. Serena arrived a breath later, her smile already arranged for whatever was about to happen. "What's this?" she asked, brightness turned up 2 notches. Nia didn't answer her. She looked at the one whose name was on the step and repeat. "You were right," she said quietly. "There's a tracker in a bag. But now it's in mine." Serena blinked as if the word mine had been mispronounced. "In your what?" "My apron pocket," Nia said. "Just now." Serena looked from Nia to Adrian with practiced confusion. "I'm sorry," she said, and moved a fraction closer to him, the way one does when stepping into the light posed for a picture. "Why would she—" David lifted a hand, the smallest of stop signs. "Let's go to the office," Adrian said. His voice didn't lift. His hand didn't tremble. He looked only at Nia, and then at the exit sign, and then at the future, as if someone had written it on the wall where only he could read it. The catering office was not meant for drama. Beige carpet, a framed certificate, a laminated phone list tacked to the corkboard. But the hotel's internal cameras watched drama every night and had learned not to blink. David asked 2 questions and got 3 answers. Who had been in the corridor in the last 10 minutes? Where the camera pointed? Where the tag's serial came from? He held out an old-fashioned guest log for Nia to sign, and she understood. We are making a record because someone will try to erase it. "Do you mind?" he asked, and indicated the corner where a dome camera's black eye sat, mounted in the ceiling like an eclipse. He didn't wait for permission before calling the security office and requesting a playback on the monitor that usually showed schedules. The footage looked like all hotel corridor footage, tense and harmless at the same time. Nia watched herself cross the frame 5 minutes earlier and felt the odd vertigo of seeing your body without your head inside it. Then the camera showed something that felt inevitable in a way that made her stomach drop even though she knew what was coming. The frame caught Giselle sliding into view, body turned as if listening to someone in the opposite direction. Her right hand dipped toward the angle where a pocket would be if a person were standing there. Her mouth formed a shape that belonged to small talk. She slipped away like thread through the eye of a needle. No sleight of hand is invisible from above. Serena made a tiny sound that managed to combine disgust and sympathy. "That's suggestive," she said carefully. "But it doesn't prove—" David had already whispered to his phone. Another frame replaced the first. A registration page, white screen, black text. Owner email on the account linked to the first found tag. Owner email on the second. The font didn't gloat. It didn't have to. Scarlisle at. Adrian didn't look at Serena. He didn't raise his voice. He did the thing that people who lead well and have been lied to often know how to do. He did not confuse composure with kindness. "Giselle," he said, not turning. "Could you wait in the hall for a moment?" Giselle paled and did not move. Serena released a short, brittle laugh. "This is absurd," she said. "AirTags are everywhere. Someone probably registered it with my email as a prank. People do things like that, to those of us who are—" She stopped herself before visible, or envied, or important tumbled out. "How would they know your address?" Adrian asked. Not accusation. An engineering question. A man poking at a system to find where it failed. Serena blinked. "It's on lots of things." David kept his face a polite wall. "We should call the hotel's GM," he said, "and HR, and ask the Meridian to keep this footage." Nia stood very still. The room had shifted in the way a bridge shifts when a truck passes. An inch here, an inch there, the sway built into the design. She knew she could be asked to leave. She knew that a story sometimes requires a witness to stop being a witness and become a stain on the carpet no one mentions. She held the small white disc in her palm and waited. Adrian looked at her at last. "You didn't have to bring this to me," he said. "Someone else would have brought a different version," she said, and surprised herself with the steadiness of her voice. He nodded once, as if she'd solved and shown her work. "Thank you," he said again, and the words sounded different now. Less like gratitude, more like a decision. If you want to know who a person is, watch them choose a stage. Some people choose darkness, and some people choose audience. Adrian asked the GM for the ballroom screens and the mic between courses. Serena objected to the optics. She objected to the timing. She objected to the indecency of embarrassing a woman in a dress on a night devoted to children with needs. She did not object to anything that had happened to a young woman in an apron. The head of the foundation, a woman old enough to not be amazed by anything the rich do, pressed her lips together and said, "Best to do it clean." Guests drifted back to their chairs, glittering herds returning to familiar watering holes. The quartet placed their bows in their laps. The stage manager whispered into a headset, and the screens blinked with the event's logo. Adrian crossed to the podium like a man who did not need to rehearse telling the truth. He didn't show the footage first. He spoke first. "You trusted me enough to come here," he said, voice horizontal, steady. "You trusted that your money would turn into roofs and books and salaries for teachers who stay in classrooms that do not have air conditioning. Trust is a fragile economy. I'm going to ask you to trust me for 3 more minutes." People sat up. People whose lives are built to avoid surprise leaned in. "Someone placed tracking devices in my property tonight," he said, "and in the clothing of a member of this hotel's staff. That staff member brought the situation to me. We verified the devices and their registration. We consulted this hotel's internal camera. It shows one of the devices being placed without consent. He could have said planted. He could have said framed. He did not. He let the facts be cruel enough. I will not be showing you a hotel employee's face," he added, and nodded toward the AV tech. "The clip you'll see ends before that happens." The screen showed what surveillance always shows: truth made ugly by its angle. A woman's hand, a white disc, a pocket, a body half turned to someone else to hide the intention. A swifter than skillful exit. The freeze frame. The email. The 2 tags sharing a single account. A sound moved through the room like wind through leaves. Not words, but the friction of a million small thought adjustments. Serena stood halfway and sat down again with the grace of someone knocking a glass over and pretending they had always meant to set it down. She composed her face into sorrow scaled for the moment. "Privacy matters," Adrian said simply. "Consent matters. Using tools meant to keep people safe, to arrange their humiliation, is a violence made invisible by manners." He took a breath. He looked at Serena for the first time since he walked on stage. "I cannot continue an engagement built on those choices," he said. The sentence had the structure of a press release. The end of it did not. "And I will not repay harm to someone with less power by pretending this is a misunderstanding to protect someone with more." There it was, the room's fulcrum. The moment where all of the laughter that had been saved up over the years to make cruel things palatable found it had nothing to hold on to. The applause did not come. The applause that came was not showy. It was a small, serious thing, as if people were clapping for the notion that a line could be drawn in a place that usually reserved lines for the velvet ropes. Serena's mouth twisted. "You will hear my lawyer," she said, and it was the first honest sentence she'd spoken all night. He inclined his head, the way a man does at the end of a meeting already entered in his calendar. "Before we return to dinner," he added, "I'd like to apologize to the staff for what was attempted here." He turned away from the mic and looked toward the coat room, toward the edges where apology belongs. "I'm sorry," he said. He didn't say to whom. He didn't need to. And then he did something else. "The Foundation will be adding a grant for service workers' continuing education to its annual awards," he said. "We'll name it for the quiet truth. We'll name it for the people who keep rooms like this honest." The applause that followed was not thunderous. It was something steadier. Rain finally beginning on dry ground. The ballroom reassembled itself with the desperation of any organism hurt in public. Forks resumed. Laughter climbed back into people's throats as if nothing had happened and found the space too small now. Serena disappeared before the sorbet. Giselle was not seen again. The screens returned to landscapes of smiling children whose names most people would forget by morning. Nia stood in the coat-room doorway with the strange corporal feeling of being both deeply inside her body and somehow across the room from it. A few guests, women with kindness trained into their faces by church and daughters, caught her eye and let a silent nod carry a message. "We saw you, even if they do not say your name." David appeared with the we-can-talk-now pace of a man who had done his difficult work, and returned to follow up. "You okay?" he asked, and Nia realized that she had been treated as a person throughout, not a problem. She let that recognition touch down. "I'm okay," she said. He handed her a card. It did not have his name on it. It had a single email address and a QR code. "If anyone contacts you about this," he said, "you call that. If you need counsel, that pays for it. If anyone's mad at the hotel, that's between us and them." She nodded, then looked past him. Adrian stood a few paces back, hands folded behind his back in that posture men adopt when they need their bodies to communicate patience. He stepped forward as if he'd been invited. "I don't want to make trouble," Nia said before he could speak. "You didn't," he said. "You ended it." She exhaled, and for once the air came back without barbs. "I'm not naive," he added, almost smiling. "This won't be the last version of this story that gets told, but I can make sure the first version honors the person who told me the truth when it mattered." She nodded. The professional thing to do would be to say, "Thank you, sir," and rehang a coat. She chose a different thing. "You don't need me in your story," she said. "But if you want to put money into people like me, and not just names on walls, make the scholarship easy to apply for on a phone. Some of us don't have laptops at home." He blinked, then grinned in the brief way a skyline grins when the sun breaks through. "Done," he said. "And if it doesn't sound like I'm offering you something you didn't ask for, my team's piloting a small program on consumer tracker safety. A public app, not a product. If you ever want to sit in and tell us where we're wrong, we'd take that." She weighed the line between invitation and exploitation, and found this sat on the clean side. "I can sit in," she said. "I have school and this job, but I can sit." "Then we'll sit," he said, "after you sleep." He left her with the kind of smile that closes a loop without tying a bow too tight. 3 weeks later, the Meridian looked less like a battlefield and more like itself again. There were new signs in the staff corridor about pockets and property and consent. There were new locks on the back stairs. There was a memo with words like policy and accountability, and the exhausted truth crossed between them. We didn't do right, and now we will try. Campus smelled like thawing grass and printer toner. Nia's evenings slid between the coat room and a campus lab, where a student group had soldering irons and too much ambition. On the nights she sat in on Adrian's small team calls, she kept her camera off and her voice on, a rectangle of sound telling them where the UX made sense and where it would fail in a bus shelter with 1 bar of service. "Make the alert bigger," she'd say. "Don't bury the instructions in a link. Don't make the language assume people know what pairing means." They listened. She learned the satisfying language of tickets opened and closed. She learned that there are rooms where money and good intention don't grind each other into powder. They sharpen each other. Once, during a break, Adrian asked, "You ever think about product?" "I think about how it lands," she said. "Always." He nodded like that was the whole point. Maybe it was. The tabloids found their own version of the saga and worried it until it bled, then moved on to a singer's divorce. Serena's lawyer issued statements shaped like fog. A journalist who preferred verbs like expose and reveal called Nia and said her name like a carrot. She sent the card's QR to his inbox and did not pick up again. On a Thursday, the foundation sent a PDF to the hotel breakroom printer announcing the inaugural Quiet Truth Awards for service workers continuing their education. The form took 5 minutes on a phone to complete. You could save and come back. You didn't need a scanner because the camera did it for you. 2 housekeepers applied on their smoke break. A busboy limited it to 120 characters and swore when he realized he had more to say. Nia smiled. Winter loosened its hand from the city's throat. The Meridian began booking weddings again, which meant harps and hydrangeas, and a certain kind of father asking if the band knew the right song to walk his daughter to. On an ordinary Saturday that was not ordinary at all, Nia handed a claim tag to a woman whose fur made the word coat a lie, and heard a sound she hadn't heard in weeks. Chirp. Small. Precise. The same metallic little bird. She felt her phone buzz with the familiar alert. She didn't take it out. She walked calmly into the corridor where the sound moved like a shadow beside the person it clung to. A young mother stood rocking a baby while her partner argued with a florist on speaker. The chirp belonged in the diaper bag or the stroller, but it circled the mother's tote instead, and her face did not know to be afraid. "Excuse me," Nia said, and smiled the kind of smile that means, "You can either trust me or regret it later." "There's a tracker in your bag." The mother blinked and almost laughed. Then she saw how Nia's eyes did not. "What does that mean?" "It might be yours," Nia said gently. "But if it's not, I can help you find it and turn it off." The mother's hands shook a little. "It's not ours." They found it in the inner pocket, taped. Nia showed her how to disable it, how to file the report, how to keep the alert settings turned on. She did not mention billionaires or ballrooms, or how a story can be the same and not be the same at all. "Thank you," the woman whispered, rocking the baby with the part of her body that would never stop rocking from now on. "Of course," Nia said. "We look out for each other." On her break, she stepped outside into bright afternoon and sent her mother a photo of the sky. Her mother wrote back, "Looks like Detroit in April. Don't forget your hat." Nia laughed aloud and didn't care who heard. When she returned to the coat room, the rack of jackets shone like a forest of small, organized trees. She straightened a sleeve so it would not crease wrong, and thought about the kind of power that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to, the kind that whispers and tells the truth, and is not surprised when the truth does work like a lever. Stories like to pretend that once a person does a brave thing, the rest of their life is a runway. The older people in Nia's life had made it plain. Bravery doesn't save you from the next choice. It only makes that choice cleaner. She liked clean. She liked edges that matched. Sometimes she still hears how she said it, that first time, how the words left her mouth like a compass placed in someone else's palm. There is a particular intimacy to telling a stranger the thing they need to hear before they are ready to hear it. The world does not reward that intimacy with fanfare. It rewards it with rooms that get a degree safer, people who learn to listen for a sound they had trained themselves to ignore. Back inside, the quartet found the next page. A donor lifted a glass. Somewhere upstairs, a child discovered the hot water came out when you twist the handle left. Somewhere in a lab, an engineer moved a button 2 millimeters because a young woman with tight curls had said, "The thumb goes there, not there." And somewhere inside herself, Nia put another stitch in the seam that holds a life together, and felt it hold. When people later told the story, and people always do, they told it with the edges sanded down. A fiancé exposed, a headline married to a moral. They forgot to mention the small act that made the big one possible. They forgot the whisper. They forgot the coat room and the chirp and the steady hands. But the ones who needed the story didn't need the headline. They needed the quiet. They needed the part where someone like them looked at someone like that and said the simple thing at exactly the right time. There's a tracker in your bag. Sometimes, that's the only sentence it takes to change who gets to walk out of a room with their head up.